Hello everybody. In this video we're going to go over starting a new league in Desktop Dynasties. You might see I'll have the revision down here. This is in the Iverson engine revision 051. So as new revisions come out, some of the interface may slightly change, but generally the same process is going to work for any changes in Desktop Dynasties. So when you start the game up, you'll come to this screen. If you've already saved a league, this load league section will show up. If you don't have a saved, it won't be there. It will just show up next time after you save your league. So the first thing you'll do is just click New Game, and this will start the league from scratch. The screen, it'll bring you to the team selection screen, and what this is this is where you pick your team that you're going to control for the entirety of this league or this save game. What you see here are all the teams that are available, and they're all ordered in the division that they're in. So in the Legendary Football Conference, this is what your division makeup looks like. And the same for the other ones. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to select the Iceberg. I can see that this team is preset to favor a running offense, and it's preset to favor a zone defense. As all the teams have default presets, these can be changed when we move on to the next stage, but it's sort of a general idea of how the AI teams are going to operate. Now, if you don't like this division setup and conference setup, you can randomize the divisions by just clicking this randomize divisions button. And if you click it, the only thing that happens is the teams move around from division to division. So maybe you've decided that your favorite team is the Iceberg, and you're going to be the Iceberg. But you want to be in a division with a couple other really cool teams, or maybe there's a team that you really want to play against. So, maybe I like this one because my favorite teams are the Kraken and the Hydra. So I want to be in a conference or in a division with them so I can play them a bunch of times. That's really all you need to do on this screen. So once you've picked your team, it'll say selected team down here. Click the pick team button. And you'll see the screen pop up now and again. It'll say what I'm working on now, and it's just sort of to let you know that something is going on in the background. And it's not frozen, it's just doing something. So that's just to remind you that, be careful clicking around really fast because I'm working on something. This stage can be skipped. If you've played before and you know that I like the Iceberg's coaches. I know I like how the Iceberg play. You can always skip coach hiring if you want. This is really here if you want to change how a team plays. So maybe I just like the Iceberg uniforms, but you can see down here my current offensive coordinator, if I click on his profile button, and these little white player cards mean profile. If I click on him, we'll cover this in more detail in a future video, but the important part here is coaching style, and this tells you how this coach operates. And this coach likes running quarterbacks. This is the one thing I want to highlight here. He likes receiving running backs, receiving wide receivers, blocking tight ends, and balanced O-line. He's an offensive coordinator, so only the offensive positions are there. And then the type of playbook he likes. But let's just say I really like the Iceberg, and I like their uniforms, and I like their logos, but I don't want a running quarterback. This is where you would change that. This offensive package column tells you the personnel package he uses on offense. The current one uses 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, and 1 tight end. Now, maybe I wanted to be a passing team as the Iceberg. What you do is you pick from the available coordinators, and I'm intrigued by this 4 wide receiver, this coordinator who has a 4 wide receiver offensive package. I can highlight that one and click see profile to get more information, and you can see this one favors a passing quarterback. That seems to fit what I want to run. So if I wanted to hire this, I would just highlight and click hire as offensive coordinator, and that coach is now my offensive coordinator. This player preference column is just a shorthand for what we looked at in the profile. So quarterback passing, running back, wide receiver, and tight end are all receiving. Offensive line is pass blocking. Looking at this player preference column, you see the same things in icon form. So this little target means passing, these little routes mean receiving, and this shield means pass blocking. Um, you look in this, maybe like a shoe with a wing on it means running. The arm, the strength means run blocking, and like the balance scales mean balance. In the development column, this is how this coach affects player development. So every coach, so if you start, think of these kind of light yellow or kind of grayed out up arrows as the default setting. So this was a little bit of improvement for everybody. And we'll get into training a little more in a future video when we talk about roster management. But think of this as if there are stars, this coach is slightly better at developing players in that position. If there are the ... that means they're slightly worse. So if you go over to the defensive coaches, you'll see some other potentials. Maybe 3 stars is very good at developing that, whereas a red arrow down means I'm very bad at developing that. So just something to think about as you pick coaches is what is that coach's effect on player development going to be. So all the things we covered for offensive coaches work the same for defensive coaches. If you highlight, we'll just look at the current defensive coach, and you see they have a player preference for defensive positions, coaching style for defense, and then they also have development for defensive positions and special teams positions. The defensive coordinator controls development for special teams. So either stick with the coaches that you start with or select new coaches. So maybe I want to switch coaches to I want to pick somebody who favors man defense for corners. Same thing. You highlight, click hire as defensive coordinator, and he becomes your defensive coordinator. When you're done with this, click done, and you immediately go into the allocation draft. This is necessary for every new league because each league is a fresh new batch of players. The initial coaches are all the same, but it keeps the leagues each game different from one to another based on the player talent that each coach has access to and how they draft their team. So there's a lot of information here. What things you'll want to pay specific attention to is the draft order. This is the first thing you gotta decide. I'm the iceberg. I have the 22nd pick. I may decide that's far too low. I don't want to pick 22nd. I want to pick somewhere higher. So you can click the new draft order button here, and what this will do is it just randomizes the draft order, and you can click this as many times as you want until you get the pick that you want. I want the number 1 pick maybe. So I'm going to keep clicking this until I get the number 1 pick, or until I get tired of clicking it and I will settle for the number 2 pick. That's good enough for me. Once you get the draft order set the way you want, just click Start Draft. And now the draft controls come up, and now the draft is active. So here's what you need to pay attention to. And this is what all these numbers mean down here. So the nightmare on the clock, the highlighted team is the one whose pick it is. It's not my pick, so I can't pick for them. But they're going to pick. That I can still look at players, though. And what you're seeing here is, we'll just take one player, this top player. That player's name, how old he is. Rookies are 22 years old. And then players generally above 32 are getting close to retirement. Most players end up retiring somewhere around the 34 range. That's age. Salary, this is how much the player makes per year. And you can see up here in the corner as you're drafting, salary cap space remaining will change based on how much salary you've picked and taken onto your team. So this is how much per year the player is making. The length of the contract depends on what round they were picked in. So the earlier rounds have longer contracts, the later rounds have shorter contracts, and the last few rounds have just 1 year contracts. And we'll talk about contracts more in the roster management video. These are if you're looking at the skill, I guess the skill display, and you can change the display with these two buttons, skills or position. But we'll cover those in just a second. But it defaults to the skill, and this is all the skills that the player has. So speed, strength, pass skill, pass strength, all the way through, defensive skills, man defense, zone defense, all the special teams. What this display represents is all of the ratings that the game engine behind the scenes when you're playing or you're fast simming uses to determine the outcome of plays. These are the actual skills and the actual numbers that the game engine uses. So for when a quarterback is throwing a pass skill and pass strength are used to determine how accurate it is and how far the quarterback can throw. So these are very important behind the scenes that tell you exactly what the players' ratings in the game engine are. If you click positions, you can see that there's it's basically a list of the positions that player could play and the rating below that. These are calculated ratings based on your coach. So as you can see, we'll just look at Danny Maddox. He has got an 88 in offensive line. What that means is this coach, the coach that's on the clock, the Nightmare, have looked at his skill ratings and determined that he's roughly out of 100 rated an 88 as an offensive line. That 88's not used in the game engine. That's just a way to see the relative value of a player at each position. You can see as a running back, he's probably only going to be rated around a 14 as running back. As a defensive lineman, he might be 43. But think of this as just a way to quickly see how good a player is at a position. The skills are what is actually used in the game engine, though. But the combination of the two is what you'll use to draft. So it's the Nightmare's pick. I can't do anything here. So what I'm going to do is I click the Make Pick button. Will make an AI team take their pick, and then the draft moves on to the next team. And now it's my turn. So the initial, when it becomes your pick, or after any pick, what the screen will do is it will change, and it'll reorder in terms of coach ranking. And that is the current team's coach. What do they think the list of players is from best to worst? And they rank that based on what do they think, their own coach personalities, but also what they think how that player is going to fit into your team. And it takes into account age, it takes into account salary, skill ratings, and the type of team that you run. And our coach has decided that Jay Patel is the best pick for our team. And he highlights it. The coach will always highlight the player that they think is best. I may want him, I may not want him. But what I can do now is I can start doing some research. And one thing you'll want to do is, I like him, you can tag him. And this tag, untag, all it will do is I click tag, and now if I move off of him, he's highlighted in green. That only means that I've basically put a little check mark on him so that I can see him later and say, oh, if he's still in the draft, he's going to be highlighted green, and it's just a way to highlight that player for me to look at again later. So I use tags for all kinds of reasons. I may say, oh, well, I really, really like this 23-year-old guy because he's one of the fastest 5 players in the league. I want to make sure if he's around in later rounds, I want to make sure that I look at him and I don't forget about this guy. So I may tag him. Or I may do things like I may say, well, let's just sort by salary, and you sort by clicking on the titles. I may say, well, there's this 24-year-old guy is the number one player in the league by salary. If he lasts into the second round, I want to make sure I don't forget to look at him, so I'll tag him. You can tag players for any reason. They're just reminders. Sorting is going to be important here because there's a lot of information and a lot of players, and it becomes somewhat overwhelming. So sorting is an easy way to narrow down. Sorting and tagging is an easy way to narrow down this information to something that's manageable. Now, since I'm a passing team, I've decided I'm a 4 wide receiver team. Quarterback is probably going to be a very important position for me. Now, Jay Patel, the guy that my coach thought I should draft, is a very good quarterback. Raymundo Farrell is probably the best quarterback in the draft. If you go by position and you sort by quarterback by clicking on the quarterback, you can see Raymundo is rated 85. Jay Patel is rated 84. So my coach thinks there's basically a 1 point difference between those two, except Jay is 8 years younger, which is why my coach thinks he's probably the best pick. But maybe I don't want to start with quarterback. I want to look at some of these other positions. I want to look at wide receiver because I have to have 4 wide receivers, and I see that, oh, there's an 87 rated wide receiver. Maybe I'll look at skills and say, why does he have 87? Oh, because he's very fast. He's very strong. He's got elite level receiving. He's got really good break tackle. So he's going to be a superstar in this league. So maybe I tag him so that I can remember to look at him. Tag him to remind myself that I looked at him and I really liked him. And you may go through the other positions just looking for who's the best player. If we look at defensive line, there's a couple of 90 rated players. And this Russell Steele is only 26 years old, so I may think, oh my goodness, I really want to pay attention to this guy. I'll tag him. And then I look down the list and I say, oh my goodness, there's 2 rookies that are rated in the high 80s for defensive line. Oh, I'm going to tag both of those players too. So if they're around, I want to take a look at them and go through it that way. And maybe you get to a point where you say, yeah, I like these positions, but I also want to just see who are the fastest players in this league. And you say this Rolf Hartman is got a 97 speed and is only 25 years old. Okay, he's not elite in anything except man defense. But if he's around later, I might want to get him. So that's how you use sorting and tagging to figure out, just to sort of build a draft target list. And I'm sure there are other ways to use it, but that's how I use it. So after you've done some sorting and things, if you want to get back to the initial ranking, click the coach's ranking button, and that will always sort everybody that's left by what your coach thinks you should take. And he still thinks I should take Jay Patel. So we're going to agree with him, and we're going to take him. So highlight the player you want, click Make Pick, and he's now on your team, and the draft has moved on to the next player. You can still scout and tag players when it's not your pick, but chances are a lot of those players are going to be drafted. So you can go one by one and click Make Pick and work your way through the draft, and you can see each time I move on to another team, the coach ranking seems to change. That's because each team values something differently in players. So they're each looking for something different. The Storm, most teams are looking for quarterbacks very early, but like the Tigers here, their top players are running back. So if I go by position, they're looking running back with their pick because they're a power team. And you'll definitely get used to each team's personalities as you move on. The Bobcats want an offensive lineman. Then we're back to quarterbacks, and now the Knights want a running back. And you can see each team's personalities kind of start to show up based on what they value and where they are in the draft. So one by one, you can go through. The top player is always going to be who that coach thinks they should take. And you can do that. Well, that gets a little long, so you can click this auto to my pick button, and it will just quick pick. It'll do the make pick, but it'll do it really fast for every team until it's your team's pick again. And now that's my team's pick. You can see most these arrows I use to page forward and backward. You can see almost all of the players I tagged are gone except this Jay McCarty. And that's what'll happen. The tags don't reserve the player for you. They just, hey, if this, it's just a reminder. And I tagged Jay McCarty, and you can see he shows up, so he just immediately draws my attention to him. And I can look at his skills and say, all right, well, why did I tag him? Oh, because he's really, really fast. Okay. Maybe this feels a little bit early for me to draft him, so I'm just going to leave him there. Let's look at what did my coach think I should draft. My coach thinks I should draft a defensive lineman right now because those are the best players that are left, and I haven't filled it. And I know I haven't filled it because if you go over to this depth chart, you can see my one player that I picked, Jay Patel, is the quarterback, and my coach believes he's our quarterback. This is going to be based on what your coach thinks. And you can see Jay Patel is also slotted in at kicker. Depth charts will be covered more in the roster video, but during the allocation draft, this is sort of your coach's best guess as to where the players are going to play. And our coach thinks I need a defensive lineman. I agree with him. So, but I don't want to take this guy because he's 30, because I see there's a rookie that is only 3 points. My coach only thinks is 3 points less talented than this Stanley Bryant. I'm willing to give up those 3 points to get a guy who's 22 years old, so I'm going to draft him. That's the Nightmares pick again. I'm going to auto to my pick, and you can see very quickly it's my pick again. That's because the allocation draft is what's called a snake draft, and that means the odd order rounds go from 1 to 32, and the even order rounds go from 32 back to 1. So that was an even round, so it became the Nightmares pick. Then it was an odd round, so it was the Nightmares pick again, and then it was my pick. And then for this pick, they think I need to take another defensive lineman. But this time I don't agree with him. This time I'm going to look at something, I'm going to look at a skill position. And as I'm sorting through wide receiver, there's an 82 rated wide receiver still here. That's pretty good. There's an 83 rated corner. That's really good. The linebackers, a couple good linebackers. But I'm a passing team. I invested my top pick in a quarterback. I'm going to go against my coach, and I'm going to draft this wide receiver because what I see, I need to draft 4 wide receivers, and I see wide receiver talent drops off pretty quickly. So Luther Fuentes is going to be my pick no matter what my coach says. So I make that pick, and then I just auto to back to my pick so I don't have to click through every single pick. You can see in my depth chart, my coach agrees. He put Luther at wide receiver. And now let's see what he thinks. Based on the 3 players that I have so far, he's now changed his mind and doesn't think I need a defensive lineman with this pick. He thinks I should take this Harvey Hoffman. Now, he could play probably somewhere in the secondary. Like, it looks like safety is his best position. But he can also play wide receiver or linebacker. He's very good at kick returner and punt returner and special teams. So this is kind of a guy that he could play multiple positions. And by the time we get to the end of the draft, I may have taken extra players at some positions. Maybe I've ignored other positions. So a guy that's this flexible is probably a good pick. So my coach likes him, so I'm going to take him. It's the Nightmares pick because we're going backwards through the draft. So we'll just make pick for him. It's the Nightmares pick again since now we're going straight 1 to 32. We'll make that, and it's my pick again. And now my coach is back on defensive line. So he must really value defensive line, so I'm going to agree with him this time. I'm going to make that pick, and then we'll auto again. Now, just you keep going. You'll follow the same process all the way through the draft. The draft is 20 rounds. That's a lot of rounds. So when you feel like you've drafted enough players that you're confident, you've kind of set up the core of your team, and you're not really interested in looking through backups and bench players, you just click this auto to end button, and it will draft the rest. It will go through and automatically draft the rest of the draft automatically. So I'm clicking that. It's basically turning control of my team over to my coaches, and they're going to pick as they were recommending players. They'll follow that same process, but they will make the picks automatically for me, fill out my depth chart, and just keep going all the way through until the whole draft is done, which is just about happening. We're in the last round, and now the draft is done. My whole team's been drafted. The colors they mirror the ratings, so the dark green means he's a very good fit for that position. The yellow means not quite as good of a fit for that position, not quite as talented. But you can see I have a whole team now. Click End Draft to exit the allocation draft. And now we're at the beginning of the season. This is where you're going to start managing your team, you're going to start playing games, and you're going to start working your way through the season. So I'm going to save that for the next video. This is the end of the league creation video. One last thing is that when you get here, if you're happy with your team, up in the upper right hand corner, just click Save League, and your league is saved and will be ready for you to load when you come back. That's it for now. Thank you.